Coming up on this Monday edition of Daybreak, divers have combed through just over half of the Sewol-ho ferry's compartments, excluding those without passengers. Authorities also seek the parents' consent to use explosives and power tools to speed up the search. China releases previously unseen documents revealing the brutal crimes committed by the Japanese military during its invasion of China in the early 1930s. Plus, a new study shows Korean workers are producing more but making less money. Productivity has jumped nearly 10% since 2008. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us, to our viewers here in Korea and around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, April 28th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And we begin with the ongoing search and rescue efforts off Korea's southwest coast following the sinking of the Sewol-ho ferry almost 2 weeks ago now. The number of confirmed deaths currently stands at 188, while 114 others, mostly teenage high school students, remain missing but presumed dead. Ji-yeon joins us from our news center now. Ji-yeon, what's the latest?
Well, hello, Mark. The authorities are now considering using more tools to speed up the search operations. The government says divers will use compact explosives to take out debris that is blocking passageways within the ferry, but only when the parents of the missing students give their consent. The explosives will almost certainly speed up operations, but there is the concern that it may damage bodies trapped inside. Authorities say they are starting to use equipment to cut metals and open doors within the vessel. The move looks to address criticism that the search operation is taking too long, one of the major complaints made by the families of the missing passengers. They're also preparing to lift the ferry out of the water and put it upright after search operations are complete. But the Commissioner General of the West Regional Headquarters of the Korea Coast Guard, Ji-yeon, says that this will only happen after they have completed their search operations, since pulling the ferry out and turning it upright may also damage bodies inside the vessel. Up to now, the divers have completed their search of just over half of the cabins. It has recovered bodies from around 35 of the cabins as of Sunday, out of the 64 cabins that are under its search plan.
And Ji-yeon, I understand the prosecution's special team on this ferry sinking raided the Mokpo Coast Guard station. Tell us more about that.
You're right, Mark. Prosecutors and police investigating the case suspect officers there neglected their duty to effectively deal with the situation in the early stages of the rescue. The Mokpo Coast Guard has been accused of wasting precious minutes by asking a student who made the first emergency call from the ferry whether he knew the coordinates of where the vessel was. This comes as prosecutors raided maritime traffic control centers on Jeju and Shindo Island over the weekend. They are suspected of neglecting their duties in the early stages of the ferry sinking and giving up their responsibility for an area that they should have been monitoring.
Yes, lots of questions all around there. And Ji-yeon, we hear a memorial for the victims of this disaster was set up in Seoul on Sunday.
Well, that's right, Mark. The rain did not stop people from saying their last goodbyes. On Sunday, more than 6,000 people paid their respects at the memorial altar set up in the Seoul Plaza in front of City Hall. The altar will remain in place until all of those who died in the disaster are returned to their families in Ansan, where most of the passengers have resided before going on the ferry. And on starting Tuesday, an official memorial will be set up at Hwarang Park in Ansan, and more people are expected to visit the site there. I'm Ji-yeon, and I'll come back with more updates later today.
Thank you, Ji-yeon. Now, we find ourselves almost 2 weeks after this awful ferry disaster, and well over 100 people remain trapped inside the Sewol-ho ferry. It has many people, including the families of the missing, asking what is taking so long. Hwang Ji-ye reports.
Efforts to find and retrieve the bodies of the missing on the sunken Sewol-ho ferry are being hampered by obstacles inside the vessel. There's a lot of debris and furniture inside, and it's piling up on the left side, which is laying at the bottom of the ocean at a 90-degree tilt. The search team had to break through cabin windows to get in and must pass through narrow passageways filled with debris.
Chairs, beds, and tables are blocking doors and the diver's passage.
Kim Jin-hwang, the Navy colonel and search officer, says that heavy objects are all piled up on the left side, and in addition to the water pressures, it's making it impossible to search every cabin of the ferry. Unfavorable weather conditions and the oil spilling from the ferry are also slowing the search. And as time goes by, the hope of finding passengers trapped inside the vessel is fading. Hwang Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, the government has come under intense criticism for what many see as its botched response to this disaster. Prime Minister Jung Hong-won on Sunday offered to resign over his handling of the incident, but President Park told him he'll have to wait until the situation is brought under control. Ji-yeon reports.
President Park Geun-hye has decided to accept Prime Minister Jung Hong-won's resignation, but said she wants to wait to release him from his duties until the Sewol-ho ferry disaster is brought under control. Jung had offered to resign early on Sunday amid mounting criticism of the government's handling of the accident.
I would like to express my deepest condolences for those who lost their lives, and my deepest apologies to the victims' families. I'd like to apologize on behalf of the government for mishandling a slew of problems that could have prevented the accident to the government's initial and follow-up response.
He added that his resignation was long overdue.
I wanted to resign much earlier, but I decided to keep my position in order to deal with the accident and come up with a set of countermeasures. I've decided to resign because I no longer want to burden state affairs.
With Jung's resignation, a cabinet reshuffle appears more likely, and many others are expected to be held accountable for what critics have called a slow and inefficient response to the ferry disaster. Jung's sudden announcement was met with mixed responses from the Korean public. Some have criticized the move as inappropriate when search and rescue operations and investigations are ongoing. Others have asked why the decision was made so abruptly. On Saturday, just a day before he made the announcement, Jung had called a meeting with related ministers to come up with countermeasures in the wake of the accident. Jung's announcement prompted the ruling Saenuri party to urge the prime minister to put all of his effort into dealing with the aftermath of the accident, while the opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy slammed the move, calling it utterly irresponsible and cowardly. Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Danmin High School resumes classes for all 3 grade levels on this Monday, some 13 days after the tragic ferry accident took so many lives of their classmates. The school will provide counselling and other psychological support services to help students grieving for their friends. Our Park Ji-yeon tells us more.
A grief-stricken Danmin High School resumes classes for all grades on Monday. The school has been closed since the tragic ferry accident on April 16th. Only the senior class was in school last week. On Monday, the freshman class and the 13 second-year students who did not go on the ill-fated field trip returned to a school that has suffered a devastating loss. To help students cope with the tragedy, the school offers various kinds of counseling support. The special programs will be led by dozens of psychotherapists and art therapists. The 75 second-year students who survived the disaster remain on leave, and it has not yet been decided when they will return to their studies. The decision will be made by doctors and the students' parents, who will also discuss programs for helping them cope with the loss of their classmates.
It is better for them to be together. One of the common programs in a situation like this is to have a camp for the students.
The parents of the surviving students plan to have their children participate in such a healing program, which will be staffed by therapists, medical doctors, and education experts. Park Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Park Ji-yeon reports. Coalition relaunched try resolve.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
According to South Korean government sources, a prospective trilateral military information sharing pact with Tokyo and Washington could be limited to information on North Korea's nuclear programs and missiles. Efforts to establish a trilateral deal between the three countries have thus far been hampered by the deep historical and territorial tensions between Seoul and Tokyo. There are Washington-Seoul and Washington-Tokyo military information sharing agreements, but no such arrangement between Seoul and Tokyo. North Korea has criticized South Korea and the United States for a recent bilateral summit between the two, saying it will not tolerate any challenges to the regime. The North's criticisms are mainly targeted at South Korean President Park Geun-hye. North Korean state media reported on Sunday that President Park, during the summit, had spoken ill of the North Korean regime and its dignity, as well as its nuclear development and goal of military and economic growth. The North also said President Park has chosen a path of confrontation and war with Pyongyang, and the North will keep going its own way. President Park sent a warning to the North at a joint press briefing following her summit with President Obama, saying that any provocations from the North will result in new international sanctions and pressure on the regime. Now, China has unveiled a set of documents revealing crimes committed by the Japanese military during its invasion of China in the early 1930s. The newly published book, called Irrefutable Evidence, consists of lots of volumes written and about the sour relations between Beijing and Tokyo. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The Chinese government has released once confidential documents revealing acts of extreme brutality committed by the Japanese military during its invasion of China, including the sexual enslavement of women and the Nanjing massacre. The 89 documents were released from the archives in northern Jiling province, which includes letters written by Japanese soldiers, newspaper articles, and other military files. The documents have been put together into a book titled Irrefutable Evidence. The Beijing News said 25 documents showed that women forced into sexual slavery were from China, South and North Korea, as well as a number of South Asian countries. Another Chinese media outlet said the documents show that the total number of comfort women came to about 400,000, half of which were Chinese, while about 140,000 to 160,000 were from the Korean peninsula. It added that one comfort woman had attended to 178 Japanese soldiers in just 10 days at a comfort station in Nanjing. In regards to the Nanjing massacre, the Beijing News reported that a Japanese reporter at the time said the Japanese military killed some 85,000 people in just 3 days. The documents show that the population of Nanjing fell to 330,000 from roughly 1 million between December 1938 and January the following year. One letter showed a soldier referring to killing the people as slicing bean curds. Other documents were related to the transfer of prisoners to the notorious Japanese military Unit 731, where brutal experiments on living people were carried out. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has vowed to continue explaining his country's stance on the comfort women issue after US President Barack Obama last week described Japan's wartime system of sex slavery as a terrible violation of human rights. According to a report by Japan's Kyodo news agency Sunday, Abe said words cannot describe what the women went through and that it's heartbreaking to think about it. Abe also said human rights were violated during wartime, including those of women, and that Japan will contribute to making the 21st century a period without human rights abuses. Abe's remarks represent a significant step back from his long-held stance on the issue. Now, US President Barack Obama's Asia tour has taken him to Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and we'll see him in the Philippines on this Monday. Despite skipping China, however, the New York Times says Washington's eye remains firmly on Beijing. The US Daily says Obama's tour of the region has reassured America's allies of its support while discouraging the Chinese from trying to open a second front on the Pacific Rim. Obama vowed to defend Japan from territorial disputes with China, but urged Tokyo to show restraint. In South Korea, he pledged to defend Seoul from any threats from Pyongyang, China's traditional ally. Some experts view Obama's visit as a containment tour, skipping Beijing, but Obama has said he welcomed a rising China as long as it is peaceful. Now, Korean workers are being paid less in recent years, even though their productivity has increased. The Korea Institute of Finance says the gap between wages and productivity in Korea has grown since the 2008 financial crisis. Korea had the fourth largest wage gap after England, Japan and Israel. The survey excluded Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, Spain and countries that are not among the top 40 countries in the world for per capita GDP. The report also showed productivity had increased by nearly 10% over the same period. Korean food and drink, well, one drink at least, is beginning to take British supermarkets by storm. According to an article in the British daily The Times, sales of the Korean distilled liquor soju have increased by 42% at Waitrose supermarkets compared to last year. It says sales have been boosted by Korean rapper Psy, who described soju as his best friend in recent commercials. Chinese cabbage used to make kimchi, as well as sesame seeds and tofu, are also flying off the shelves as shoppers look for healthy meal options. The spiking sales come amid predictions Korea could become one of the world's top 10 food exporters by 2030. And time now for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we connect live to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news centre. Good morning to you, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. One ailing Swedish monitor has been freed by pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine, but at least 7 other Europeans and several Ukrainians remain in custody. The self-declared mayor of Slavyansk, Vyacheslav Ponomarev, declared them prisoners of war in a news conference that paraded the inspectors from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. They were taken Friday local time outside of the flashpoint city of Slavyansk during a standoff between the separatists and Kiev's forces. Ponomarev said the monitors were NATO spies and that he would consider a swap for detained pro-Russian activists. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas has denounced the Holocaust as, quote, the most heinous crime in modern human history, in one of the most strongly worded criticisms by an Arab leader. The statement was made on Sunday on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day in response to a question by American Rabbi Mark Schneier, who heads a Jewish-Muslim interfaith group. The Palestine Liberation Organization called on Israel to return to the peace talks, but Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu told CNN Abbas was likely carrying out damage control. Netanyahu called on Abbas to tear up his pact with Hamas, underlining that there will be no negotiation with a government backed by a group that does not recognize Israel. And turning to Egypt next, where a court has sentenced 11 supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi to prison terms of 5 to 88 years. The sentences came down as punishment to a string of demonstrations that followed Morsi's removal last year. The same court in Minya had handed down death sentences to more than 500 last month. This as the military-backed government continues its crackdown against Islamists, including the Muslim Brotherhood, labeled as a terrorist group. And finally, the Catholic Church welcomed 2 new saints as Pope Francis canonized his predecessors, John the 23rd and John Paul II, on Sunday. Hundreds of thousands packed the St. Peter's Square area to witness the proclamation as relics from each former pope were placed near the altar. Pope Francis honored the men as courageous leaders who withstood the tragedies of the 20th century.
Now, for rookies in any sports, your first win is always a memorable one, and that's why for 19-year-old Baek Kyu-jung, her first KLPGA victory was an emotional one. Now, at the KLPGA Nexon Masters, the 19-year-old finishes off the last round with 6 birdies, 1 bogey, and 1 double bogey. Good enough to finish 9 under par overall to claim her first KLPGA title of her career. While it was a fierce battle between Baek and last season's top star Chang Ha-na, 23-year-old Chang Ha-na would finish second to the rookie after collapsing late in this last round. And now moving over to some Sunday's KBO action, the NC Dinos shut out the Tucson Bears 6-0, with the Lotte Giants beating the SK Wyverns 3-1, and the Samsung Lions hang on to beat the Nexon Heroes 2-1. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the struggling LG Twins take on the Kia Tigers. And of course, going into the game here, just a brilliant pitcher's duel between Kia's In Jung-sup and LG's Corey Riordan, as both pitchers throws blanks across the board. Now, both teams do go scoreless until the 8th inning of the game. Kia's Kim Ju-hyung at bat. This one driven to deep left center field, and there it goes, gone. A solo shot puts the Kia Tigers up 1-0. By the bottom of the inning, with a man on second, Chung Hee-yoon singles to left, and RBI single ties the ballgame 1-1. Next play, here we have men on first and third. Lee Byung-gyu grounds out to second, good enough to score Im Jae-chul, and LG has the lead 2-1. 9th inning, Bong Jung-gun comes in for the save as the LG Twins take this game 2-1. And now shifting over to some Sunday's K-League Classic action, the Pohang Steelers crushed the Incheon United 3-0, and the Ulsan Hyundai Tigers draw against Sangju Sangmu 1-1. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the super match between FC Seoul and Suwon Samsung Blue Wings. Of course, with over 29,000 fans showing up to the Suwon World Cup Stadium, the atmosphere is absolutely insane, as Suwon comes out aggressive throughout the first half with 7 shots, but none of which finds the back of the net. Now, both teams go scoreless going to the second half of the match, but it's Escudero in the 77th minute sending one past the goalkeeper, and that's all the goal in this match as FC Seoul beats Suwon 1-0. Now, the NBA playoffs is in full swings, but Donald Sterling, who's the owner of the LA Clippers, is under fire for his racist comments that were taped. And while many speculated that his own team would boycott their next game, turns out they won't. After a tape was leaked with Donald Sterling telling his girlfriend not to bring any African Americans to his games, players and coaches discussed boycotting their next game, but have decided not to play. Of course, while Sterling will not be on hand during Game 4, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver plans to further investigate the issue, with a punishment set to be handed down soon. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
I'm Ji-yeon here to give you a weather update in Jindo and around the country. Weather conditions over in Jindo continue to be looking tough throughout the day, with heavy rain of up to about 50 millimeters in that area. But, not only in Jindo, but the rest of the country should also receive showers all day long. Regions down south should receive on and off heavy showers during the day, so please be prepared for that and watch out for slippery roads on your morning commute. And this round of rain should drag down the temperatures even lower than yesterday. High in Seoul will only hike up to 15 degrees Celsius, which is a couple of degrees lower than yesterday. So if you felt a bit chilly yesterday, be sure to dress warmer today. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 12, but the high in Seoul and Daegu should rise to 15, while Gwangju peaks to 18, and Busan should climb to 16 later in the afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju will reach to 19. Daejeon peaks at 16, and Dokdo should see a high of 14, while Mount Keungang tops out at 11. Well, it will be a rainy and chilly day today, so don't forget to have an umbrella handy and dress accordingly. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after 10.
Thank you very much, Ji-yeon, for the weather update there. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in about half an hour's time. And we'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.